And I think that where companies become too reliant on AI, so for example, if they use AI to look at people's CVs and determine who should be interviewed and who shouldn't be, you might have a candidate who's excellent at their job, but terrible at writing their CV. And so if you're using AI and AI excludes that candidate because they couldn't write a good CV, then you're potentially missing out on an excellent hire.
Welcome to the All in Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify to stay tuned for our weekly episodes. I'm your host, Lydia, and joining us today is Richard Triggs of Arete Executive Search. Welcome to the show, Richard. Thanks for joining us.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. So what's the mission behind Arete, Richard? And how did you arrive at this name? Maybe a little bit about what it means or what it means to you, in fact.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'd like to pretend that, when we started, we had a mission, but the reality is that my wife at the time and I had both been working in the recruitment industry. And I think that we were both getting very frustrated working for other people. And it got to the point where it was almost like, if we don't do it ourselves, we have to stop blaming or complaining about our circumstances because of the businesses we're working in. So it was almost, let's just start something and let's really prove to ourselves that we can create and maintain and build a business. And so at the time, we were typing into Google words like success and achievement and fulfillment and so on. I didn't want to call the business Richard Triggs or Triggs Recruitment because I never wanted it to be about me. And so this word popped up, Arete, and Arete is a Greek word. It means the fulfillment of one's full potential. Or when it was used by Homer, the Greek author, the Odyssey and the Iliad, it was where heroes gather to realize their full potential. And we thought, well, that's a fantastic word for us. We certainly want our employment clients to achieve their full potential. We want our candidates to achieve their full potential, and we want to achieve it for ourselves as well.
And that became your mission?
And that became our mission.
I also understand that Arete uses a performance-based hiring methodology. So how do you maintain that competitive edge, and what differentiates your approach from others maybe?
Sure. Well, performance-based hiring methodology was developed by an American named Lou Adler. And I was very fortunate, probably close to 20 years ago, to have some training with Lou. And he's written a fantastic book called Hire With Your Head. And so the idea of performance-based hiring is you want to hire people who have done it before, they've done it well, and they're motivated to do it again. And it's a very specific recruitment methodology that, in my opinion, is world's best practice for recruiting, not just at an executive level, but across all roles. But it's time consuming and it requires recruiters to be, in my opinion, more professional and more consultative and to truly be a trusted advisor. So how does it give us a competitive advantage? Because by using that methodology, we're far more successful in delivering. Our clients really appreciate the fact that we are truly trusted advisors, and we get a lot of repeat business, which is awesome. And I think the other thing is a lot of recruiters pay lip service to today's candidate is tomorrow's client. But whilst they say that, they treat candidates like a commodity and they don't really invest in the candidate. And so our philosophy has always been, if we treat our candidates with respect and again, going back to Arete, then when they get their next role, even if they haven't been placed by us, they are likely to say, well, Richard really offered me some great advice through my job search. Therefore, now I'm in this new role, I'm going to use Arete to recruit my vacancies. And one of the ways that I do that, in 2015, I wrote a book called Uncover the Hidden Job Market, which is aimed at helping executives and board directors to manage their job search. And that book, I've probably given away or sold over 15,000 copies of that. And so, again, a competitive advantage is by giving people a book and other materials and so on to help them in their job search. If you're happy and helpful, the universe looks after you. So that's really my philosophy.
Indeed. And in 2015, the book came out, right? And since then, we've seen so many different changes, multiple disruptions. Let's just go back to 2019 until now. So there have been all these disruptions that come in from multiple points, economic, whether it's socioeconomic or whether it's health. We're coming out of the pandemic period and we're now post-pandemic. So how has the recruitment landscape changed in your view recently?
Well, I think that obviously probably one of the most significant changes was LinkedIn. And now LinkedIn Recruiter is used by both third-party and internal recruiters. It has absolutely changed the way that we can go about search and can deliver fantastic results for our clients. So, for example, in the global search world, there are probably 5 main organisations: Spencer Stuart, Heidrick & Struggles, Russell Reynolds, Egon Zehnder, Korn Ferry, who traditionally were charging, upwards of 30% to deliver an assignment, taking 12 weeks to deliver a shortlist. And of course, LinkedIn coming in has completely disrupted that market. And I'd like to think that Arete Executive has been, right at the forefront of that. So to give you an example, we have a product, we call it our shortlist solution, where we will deliver a fully interviewed shortlist within 20 working days, handed it over to the client. They close out the balance of the process, and we do that for a flat fee of $9,500. Now, you never, ever would have seen a solution like that pre-LinkedIn Recruiter, and as LinkedIn's become a more useful tool. I think one of the other major changes is that, especially post-COVID, prior to COVID, the vast majority of our clients were very local because they would want to meet me and shake my hand and have a coffee. And so geographically, you would predominantly recruit where you were. Well, now, of course, post-COVID or even during COVID, people are much more comfortable now having a Zoom or a Teams-based relationship, as you and I are right now. So to give you an example, during COVID and now, we are headhunting Americans for jobs in America, and yet we're based in Brisbane, the other side of the world, and we're recruiting for clients that I've never met and probably will never meet. So again, both of those things have massively changed it from the recruiter's perspective. From the employer's perspective, I think one of the biggest changes has been that candidates expect much greater work-life flexibility now. And whereas in the past, again, pre-COVID, a candidate might say, if I could work one day from home a fortnight, that would be so awesome. Do you think that the employer would allow me to do that? Now candidates are saying, well, if I can't work 3 days a week from home, I'm not interested in the job. So it's forcing employers to become much more flexible in terms of the way that they're engaging people, because if they don't, then they just will miss out.
So Richard, you mentioned earlier there was that you maintain a 20-day delivery promise to the client. So how do you maintain that kind of service delivery standard? Looking at all the different expectations from candidates, and also in terms of consulting or playing that consultative role with the client. Does that affect the service delivery time?
Well, there's a few points in that. I think one of the things is, in the recruiting industry, obviously, as you'd be aware, there are recruiters that work contingently. In other words, they're only paid on a successful placement. And there are recruiters that only work on a retained basis, where it means that they are paid as a proper professional to do the work necessary to get the outcome. Now, you could never do what we do as a contingent recruiter, because contingent recruiters know that they may only place 1 in 5 jobs they're working on. Whereas in our business, we only work on a retained basis. So that means that my consultants, or who I call associate partners, they can work a much smaller number of jobs because they know they're getting paid for every assignment. So I have a team, and that team, they may only be working on between, say, 4 and 6 jobs at any one time. And again, be using technology, we find that, by working hard and working intelligently and efficiently, we can consistently hit that target of shortlist delivery in 20 days. Mm-hmm. Now, if the client then takes time to run the back end of the recruitment process, that's up to them. And it's not to say we only deliver this solution. We also run full service assignments where, for example, we might be recruiting a CEO or a very senior leader, and we will run a traditional recruitment retained process, a third engagement of our fee, a third on shortlist, balance on placement. Those typically take longer, but we charge a lot more for those.
In terms of generative AI and the use of AI technology in executive recruitment itself, in what ways have these technologies impacted the space?
And I can't really offer an opinion more broadly than in our business. And I would say that obviously there's AI associated with doing Boolean search strings to find candidates on LinkedIn and so on. But fundamentally, recruitment is a human business. Human beings want to talk to human beings. And I think that where companies become too reliant on AI, so for example, if they use AI to look at people's CVs and determine who should be interviewed and who shouldn't be, you might have a candidate who's excellent at their job, but terrible at writing their CV. And so if you're using AI and AI excludes that candidate because they couldn't write a good CV, then you're potentially missing out on an excellent hire. So I would say our reliance on AI, we're not highly reliant on it at all. I mean, we just have people who love to recruit and love to talk to candidates, and they know that they have to hustle to get the job done.
Yeah, and going back to your point of relationships, right, being paramount, I mean, this is certainly key when it comes to establishing that trust with clients and candidates. So how do you nurture that kind of relationship between the consultants or your associates with the candidates as well as the client? What goes into that? What sort of factors really build that trust?
Well, I think people want to be part of a community. So I think there's two ways of looking at it. One is, the first thing is you've got to do a really good job. As a recruiter, we tell a client that we can deliver, then it's up to us to deliver. We should hold the risk of non-performance. And of course, I think the statistic is 90% of people who join the recruitment industry leave within 2 years, never to return, because they think, oh, it's so easy. You know, you just go and talk to some clients and pick up some jobs and put an ad on a job board. But it's obviously far more challenging than that. And recruiters typically don't have a very good reputation as an industry because recruiters are notorious for over-promising and under-delivering, both to employers and to candidates. So the number one foundation is you actually have to do your job really well. I think the second thing from a client point of view is you have to be more than just a recruiter. You have to be a trusted advisor. So when a lot of recruitment consultants are being briefed on roles, they're not challenging the employer to say, do you really need that? Or is that truly feasible? Or, you know, why do you require that? They're not pushing back. And as a result, they're getting briefed on roles which are either unfillable or extremely challenging. So I think part of delivering a good service is having the relationship with the client where you can, in fact, be an advisor to them. And then the final part is about building community. So, for example, for myself, I run a monthly networking event. I run a bi-monthly lunch event. I am regularly traveling and meeting with both clients and candidates. I run special forums for CEOs and managing directors to talk about their businesses. It's very much about bringing those people into your community and then just showing them lots and lots of love.
Right. And in terms of CEOs or the C-suite and their outlook on bringing new hires into the company to drive transformation or to drive the next phase of a business, what sort of leadership mindset should leaders or should talent acquisition heads be looking at in terms of getting that kind of executive talent into the fray? What sort of elements or what should they consider when they look for talent that is going to be fundamental to driving transformation in the business?
Sure. So going back to performance-based hiring, again, ideally, you want to find people who have done it before, they've done it well, and they're motivated to do it again. So the first thing is to become really clear, what are the actual quantifiable key deliverables of the role? A lot of the time, a position description will be very generic and what I call motherhood statements. We want somebody who can lead a team and meet budget and do it safely, but every job has its own unique key deliverables and responsibilities and so on. And so the first thing is being very thoroughly briefed on what those key outcomes are. And that includes cultural things, which is what really you're referring to. And then once you understand that, it's then looking for the evidence in the candidate that they have done it before, or if they haven't done it before, they've got comparable transferable skills that demonstrate that they can do it. So not all leadership roles require the same type of leader. Businesses are at different times maybe looking for somebody to grow the business, or to reduce the business, or to launch new products into new markets, or to deal with going into voluntary administration. Again, it's thinking at this point in time, what are the leadership qualities that we require? And let's find people who thrive in that environment. Somebody may be fantastic at growing businesses, but they've got no ability to manage through a voluntary administration. It doesn't mean that they're a bad leader. It just means it's perhaps a poor fit for a role, if that in fact is what is required. So once again, it's not a same size fits all. It's every placement, every brief is understanding and becoming ultimately clear on what are the outcomes required.
What steps can a consultant take to make sure that they are completely clarified or they've completely understood what needs to be looked at in terms of a job brief or a role that comes their way?
We are putting together a document called a performance profile. So I'll say to my client, okay, let's assume that you've employed a person and let's call them Sam. So Sam's coming into the job. What are they walking into? And what are the mission critical key deliverables you need done in the first 90 days? And then the employer will say, okay, well, this is the situation, and this is good, this is bad, this is where we need remedial action, or this is a particular project that we need them to get focused on. Okay, fantastic. Once they've achieved that, what's the next 3 months look like? Okay, well, once Sam's done that, then the next things we need are Okay, once that's been achieved, what's the next 6 months look like? If you were to sit down at 12 months' time and say, Richard, I'm just about to do Sam's performance review, I couldn't be more delighted. They've kicked every goal. They have achieved 100% of what I want. What did they do for you? And the interesting thing, Lydia, is that a lot of the times the employers might go, geez, Richard, that's a really good question. I don't actually know.
Which means they probably haven't given that enough thought, and then they will go and think about that. Yeah.
So again, going back to my role as a trusted advisor is to be able to elicit that information and then articulate that back to them in a document, which also covers cultural fit and, qualifications, et cetera, have them agree to that. And then that becomes the foundation of us then going to the market. And the great thing about doing it that way is when you're approaching candidates love to do what they're good at. So if you can clearly explain what your client wants, the candidate's going to say, oh, I love doing that. I'm really good at it. I'm definitely interested. Or they're going to say, look, that's really not for me. And in that instance, it saves a lot of time, and we end up presenting much stronger shortlists.
Now, from the candidate's point of view, seeing executive search, etc., you mentioned earlier that candidates' expectations are also changing. So in terms of the executive level and talent available in that space, what are they searching for that recruiters could pay attention to and maybe be more tuned to?
Well, I think candidates are looking for jobs where they will succeed and thrive, where they will be mentored and developed to their fullest potential. And again, what you see a lot of the time, if you read job ads or position descriptions, they're very bland and boring. There's really no employer value proposition. There's no call to action that would really inspire a candidate to want to put themselves forward for an opportunity. And then in that opportunity, or considering that opportunity, what do they want? They want visionary leadership. They want to work with a great team. They want to be given the tools necessary to do a great job. They might need some work-life flexibility around study or family commitments or whatever it might be. And of course, they want to be remunerated appropriately. Too often, employers focus on it's just about the money, whereas the reality is money is definitely a consideration. People want to be paid what they believe that they're worth. But by the same token, they have far greater reasons to be attracted and retained into a role than just what the money is. Again, it's about understanding what is going on for this candidate. Why are they actively looking for a role? What are the kinds of things that are important to them? And then making sure that the opportunity is presented that meets their needs. To use an expression I said earlier, it's not one size fits all. Everybody has different aspirations and different expectations. So it's about understanding those and making sure that you can deliver them as an employer.
Yeah, it's going back to the relationship aspect of
course,
of being in the people business first and foremost, right?
Absolutely. And I think that it's very easy to lose sight of that. If you just think, how would I want to be treated in a recruitment process? Well, generally how you want to be treated is how you should treat the people. Simple.
Yeah, that's yes, that's right. Because it's really your experience as well. And very often we tend to separate the two when we've got a task right in front of us.
Well, I put a post up on LinkedIn the other day and saying that I think internal recruiters in most instances now are not putting their names and phone numbers on ads. And so therefore candidates can't ring them to ask them any questions. And I said, do you think that you're missing out on good candidates? Because if a good candidate can't ring and ask questions, they probably won't apply. And I had a few internal recruiters respond back and they said, oh, Richard, it's all very well for you to say that, but I don't have time to talk to candidates. I said, well, if you don't have time to talk to candidates and you're a recruiter, you're either in the wrong career or there's a systemic issue where your employer is expecting you to do too much. But if we're in a human business and you are directly engaged on the basis of attracting talent, and yet you don't have time to talk to talent, then there's a big problem.
The role of professional or someone in recruitment or talent acquisition, especially, is, as you pointed out, the use of technology, the need to maintain that human connection, and also crunch data as soon as you get that, right? So there's so many different changes to that role itself, turning into a trusted advisor, as you pointed out earlier. So, in terms of the traits or how the role of talent acquisition has changed over the years, in your experience, have there been any takeaways?
Well, if you're talking about talent acquisition directly within employers, then I'd say, obviously, the advent of LinkedIn Recruiter made a lot of organizations say, hey, we're spending all of this money on external recruitment. We don't need to spend all that money anymore. We can just hire Mary and give Mary a LinkedIn Recruiter license. And instead of paying $100,000 for one placement, we can pay Mary $100,000 for a whole year and she can make 30 placements. The reality, though, is if a recruitment consultant is of a high quality and they can earn a lot more money externally, why would they go in-house? They would only go in-house if they are unsuccessful as an external recruiter. So these employers are bringing in, let's say, average recruiters. They're massively overloading them in the workload, and then they're wondering why they're not getting access to the best quality of talent. So I would say the role of talent acquisition within organizations has become much more commoditized. I think the skill levels have dropped dramatically. And I think that a lot of employers have only got a short-sighted perspective. Okay, we might be saving money on recruitment fees, but what's our average length of time to fill? What's our cost of poor hire? And a lot of those things, I think if they really did an analysis, they probably would find that the role of talent acquisition is not the great savior that they expected it to be. On the other side of the coin, in third-party recruitment companies, it used to be that employers were reliant on recruiters because they had no other access to talent. So they would say, we need to go to a finance specialist because they've got the database of the CFOs we want for our business. Well, 99% of those CFOs now have a LinkedIn profile. And so if all the recruiter is doing is just being a conduit, a presenter of CVs and not really adding value, then employers quite rightly would say, well, why don't we just do it ourselves? So the role of talent acquisition within third-party recruitment companies needs to become much, much more than just putting an ad on Seek or a job board and praying the right person applies. And we will continue to see a lot of recruitment companies either unable to transition to being a more consultative business or just not performing financially and failing.
Richard, you've run your business for 15 years, since 2009, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, so, as a person who has run a business successfully and also built that community around you, a lot of work has gone into that over the course of this time, I can imagine. So what advice would you give someone who's starting or aspiring to become an entrepreneur in the executive search space?
Well, firstly, I would say go and work for somebody who's successful and can mentor you to be the very best recruiter that you can, if possible. This is a long-term career. I've been doing this now for over 20 years. And whilst, I would say that even from the beginning, I was more successful than many recruiters that I knew, it's taken a long time and a lot of hard work, a lot of trial and error, a lot of scary moments where I've looked at the money in the bank and looked at my payroll and thought, oh my God, how am I going to pay the people this month? So it's tough. I think if you're an entrepreneur going into any business, whether it's executive search or plumbing or retail, you need to be very tenacious and you need to understand that you're going to be tested. And do you have the tenacity and the perseverance and the self-belief to be able to do that? But you also need to really, really invest in your education and not regard recruitment like the vast majority of recruiters do, but actually want to become an expert. I think Malcolm Gladwell, talks about 10,000 hours. There have been at least 3 or 4 occasions in the 15 years of Arete where I've come very close to saying, oh, this is too hard. I'm just going to go back and work for somebody else. And I'm very pleased that I chose at the time not to do that. But, it's been a wild ride. It's not for the faint-hearted, but if you can make it work, it has a lot of reward at the other end.
Yeah, speaking of Malcolm Gladwell, I was just, it just came to my mind that, there's a concept of being an outlier in recruitment as well, right? And you're looking at candidates and you're looking at the one who might be the perfect fit, who might fit the job description. What's the thinking behind that, perhaps? Just looking at the candidate that might have something different to bring to a role and making that assessment between the two?
Well, I think that, again, understanding very thoroughly the brief and being a competent recruiter and talking to candidates to really explore their key achievements and transferable skills, will give you a level of awareness as to whether you think that that person is appropriate to present to your employer. And, again, it's a learned skill. It takes a long time. And to give you one example, I was recruiting a couple of years ago for a trade services business that provides electricians and plumbers and to go and do repairs. And they wanted a new chief operating officer. And they said to me, Richard, we absolutely want somebody who has a trade qualification. It is a prerequisite for consideration. If they don't have a trade qualification, they won't be able to build rapport with the team. They have to be able to walk the talk. And so whilst we presented a number of people who were like that, there was one particular guy who applied who was actually a lawyer, but he'd worked for companies that did the majority of their marketing online. He had worked for Amazon and a travel company. And I knew that this employer did the bulk of their marketing through search engine optimization. And so I was able to say to the employer, look, this guy's not trade qualified. He's actually a lawyer, but he has expertise in search engine optimization marketing. And I really think that you should consider him. And he ended up getting the job. Now, 99.99% of times, that person would never, ever have gotten to interview if the recruiter had purely looked at his CV and then said, no, thanks, but no thanks. It was only through investing in the candidate and really understanding them and really understanding the client's needs and being able to push back to the client that we were able to get that outcome, which was a great win-win for everybody involved.
That takes also, as you said, a thorough understanding of what the client wants, as well as that kind of calculated risk can, if this person is really able to achieve the goals that are set out for that particular role and inspire that person to perhaps look at those possibilities as well.
Exactly.
And Richard, you've done recruitment for 20 years now. So what might be your favorite or most memorable recruitment story?
Oh, look, I
I'm
was
sure
thinking about this question.
So many.
I think, look, there's so many. I think that story I just told about that fellow it was a fantastic story. I think that, as a recruiter, we love the thrill of the chase, and we love to win, and we hate it when we lose. Often people refer to the recruitment industry as champagne and razor blades. So you're either celebrating with champagne or you're thinking, oh, mate, you're contemplating the razor blade. And so one of the things that I absolutely love is when my little humble business in Brisbane, Australia, successfully pitches against one of the big 5 global search firms and wins the business and delivers fantastically. And I mean, it's a little bit like David beating Goliath. It's those wins that really make me continue. It's a little bit like they say when you play golf, you can have a terrible round of golf, but if at the end you hit one good shot, even though you've cursed the whole time, you go, oh, I'll come back tomorrow for another game. Well, it's the same thing, as a small recruiter trying to compete against a lot of these big companies, it can become very frustrating and very demoralizing. But occasionally you get one of these wins and it makes you feel very excited for the future. The other thing, of course, is, I love developing and mentoring my team. And again, not really specific to recruitment, but I think most senior leaders, some of their most memorable moments will be seeing somebody that's worked for them go on to achieve great things and feeling proud and humbled that they'd played a part in that.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your generous insights today, Richard. I certainly enjoyed them. For those listening in and who want to pick up a conversation with you later, do drop your contact details. Where can they connect with you?
Sure. Well, obviously, Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, but one of the things with LinkedIn is you're only allowed 30,000 connections. And I've been pretty much up and around 30,000 connections. So, for those people who go, I sent Richard a LinkedIn connection request and he didn't accept it. It's nothing personal. It's just that I'm at capacity. But certainly you can message me via LinkedIn. My business, Arete Executive, is pretty easy to find. If you're interested in getting a copy of my book, Uncover the Hidden Job Market, you can download a PDF version of it for free from my website. I do have a new book coming out called Winning the War for Talent, which is aimed at recruiters and employers, how to hire and retain, which is going to be out shortly. And once again, I don't write these books to make money. I do it because that gives me a way of building community and building brand and being of service. So, and then I have my own podcast, the Arete podcast, and there's a bunch of other things I do. So I'm sure if anybody Googles Richard Triggs and looks for this very handsome young fellow, you'll find me. And please feel free to reach out and touch base. And I'd love to see how I can help you.
Thanks again, Richard. It's been great having you on the show, and all the best for the launch of your second book. Is that right? The second book, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So, exciting to finally see it come to fruition.
I can imagine. Yes. So thank you so much, Richard. Again, it's been great listening to all your insights. And we have been in conversation with Richard Triggs of Arete Executive Search. Thank you for joining us. And remember to subscribe to stay tuned for more weekly episodes from All in Recruitment.